Hello, today no rant, just some sharing. Thought it might be time to be informative, not negative. I mean, people are like, oh, all you do is rants now. No, I do them on Sunday at 10. There's four or five other videos a week usually. So, I mean, that's me ranting now about the rants. But people are like, oh, you're just so negative. Yeah, because people clicked on the rants and me yelling at a camera about the industry or paid shills or clickbait or YouTube decline or shops closing or whatever. Apparently, you click on it. So you are rewarding me with the clicks, and then you say, oh, you're just doing the rants. Don't be so negative. Okay. All good. I don't care. Let's talk about my tone journey. Now, something that I did early in the rants with John Simons when he was here, we talked about tone versus sound. And tone is in the fingers. Tone has nothing to do with the chain after the guitar. Now, the guitar and the fingers together, they make the tone. And a clean guitar tone is very sine wavy in a way. It's a little bit more than a sine wave, of course, but it's a very pure tone, pure sound, sound tone, vibrations. And for me, tone is how long is it there? How's the vibrato? So pitch over time, volume over time, which is sustain. How do you attack? So the attack, decay, sustain, release. What happens during those times? How long are these times? That's all tone. Phrasing can also be guitar tone or mistaken. Your slides, your bends, your wiggles. This is all something very personal between you and the instrument. That is tone. That tone then, that also has something to do with frequency content in a way. How many harmonics on the attack, and how do they behave when they go down and die down? How many of those harmonics go away? Do other harmonics come up? And that is something that a good instrument, together with your expertise and finesse with the right and left hand, can tickle out of an instrument. But then it needs to be translated into sound. Sound is something you set up. Sound is something you dial in on an amp. Treble, presence, bass, gain, extra gain, even more gain. What IR you use, what speaker do you use, what boost do you use, what EQ do you use, right? That's all the sound. That sound can be set up with gear and knobs and switches and pedals and stuff. IRs, cabs, that's all part of the sound. However, that sound goes into a human ear, which then makes decisions and translates certain things based on the information you're getting from a sound into different tone. It's not enough gain, so I dig in a bit harder, right? There's this beautiful reverb and smeary delay. So I pull back a bit and I play a little bit softer because I want that to bloom and come up. The compressor is doing that. So I pull back, I dig in. So there's an audible feedback. Don't really know where I was going. Difference between tone and sound. So when I'm saying my tone journey, it's really only a little bit true. Most of it's my sound journey. Which actually started relatively late. So I had I started with a little horrible practice amp in 1990. You know, one of those horrible little bullwoofer, we call them, scream cubes. That's what we had back in the day. I graduated from that to, I think, a crate amp Quaid was a company. And at some point, I got an Engel Savage 120. My grandpa left me some money, so I spent it on that. And also a Digitech 2101 with a solid-state power amp and two Rocktron 112s as a stereo setup. So that was a kind of a digital system, but with a tube in it. But I had absolutely no tone in my fingers or ears to adequately assess what that stuff was doing, what I had to set up. I was interested in the notes, not what it sounded like. I didn't have the expertise. I didn't have the reference or, Eddie, that band, whatever. That was all stuff I had, and I liked it, but I didn't have ears, right? Took the 2101 with me to Boston when I went to Berkeley, and that was my main guitar aggregate, my main source of guitar sounds for all my time there. Wasn't great in retrospect, but it could record the notes. And I'm an arranger, so the notes mattered. Now in Berkeley, not in the practice rooms, in the lab rooms, when we had a lab with 10 guitar players in a room for 45 minutes, we had Fender hot rods. When I played through that, my playing was so different. I love playing that clean channel with a little bit of reverb. They were so thick, so rich. It had nothing to do with my little Digitech thing at home. So that stayed in my mind of there's something about a tube combo. Went to Los Angeles, worked at Guitar Center. Before I stopped working at Guitar Center, got myself a Pod Pro. So back to digital. Early digital. Actually, in Boston, I already had a pod later on in the last year. The Bean. I had the first Bean. And yet again, it was all about the notes, not about what they sounded like. I cared about what I was playing in terms of the arrangement, but not really did it sound good or was it a great metal sound or whatever. So in LA, I just upgraded to the Pro version. And we had that at the studio that I then ran. I wrote jingles and produced bands, and again, all the digital stuff. Never thought about it. Never thought about what real guitar players use. And then at some point, I came home from Germany, and I was joining like a little band and a jam group with Cindy and her husband up in the mountains, and bought Line 6 delay pedal, DL4, and the Fender Hot Rod combo, because that was still in my mind from Berkeley. I knew that sounded phenomenal. And it was $6.99 at Guitar Center. So I bought that. That was my one tube amp. Couldn't distort it, sounded shit distorted. But put a DS1 in front of it, hell yeah. Instant Petrucci is what I thought. Maybe it was. So that was my one tube amp. And then I had a whole bunch of THC amps from the firma Eich. They made Tech amp back then, and they had a whole bunch of these very, very expensive non-master volume all-tube heads that they had at NAMM, and they parked at my studio for the next year's NAMM. So I didn't understand at all. Non-master volume? I had no idea what that meant, or where the benefit was. You had to crank that up to be distorted. I wanted them to distort, right? I didn't understand. They were extremely well-built point-to-point boutique amps that I completely didn't understand. They just sounded faddy and way too loud and not great. And I had to mic them, and I used them for some punk stuff because they sounded shit. Because I had no idea what I had there. They were fantastic amps that I just didn't understand. So fast forward, moved back to Germany in 2006. and I had a Pod Pro XT, which had digital ins and outs. I used that for most of the stuff. Still wasn't really recording amps. And somehow in the trip back home to Germany, the the converter broke. So you couldn't plug in anymore. You could route digitally to it and out of it from my interface, but it was too complicated. But I did have that 112 combo that I ran with a German to American converter power supply thing because it only runs on 110 and we have 240 in Germany or 220. I don't know, one of those, one of the twos. And I started working with that amp. Actually built a box for it so I could mic it with a Sennheiser 609. And loved it. Had that DS1. But then I was like, I want that creamy singing lead tone. And I started buying some drive pedals. Metal Zone. Yeah, I bought a Metal Zone. And I bought some drive pedals to see where it went, like a Digitech, distortion, couple of drive pedals. Was back in my studio in Hohenzollern, up in the attic. Oh my God, was it hot in the summer. Even with an air conditioner. It was on the side of a hill, up in the attic. Nice studio. Some of my friends will remember. And I had this tube amp in this box. But I slowly inched towards getting those sounds that I was looking for, except for the leads. And I was working on a bigger album, prog metal thing. And I contacted La Boga, and I think for a deal, they sold me an Alligator 50. Now that wasn't very high gain, but was a very honest, kind of Marshall-y rock tones. Great amp. So I could play around with that. And there was a head, and I actually used the cab from the Fender Hot Rod for all recordings. Now that's probably a cab that nobody would use for anything, but trust me, holy shit, did that thing sound good. I could show you recordings, but that's not what we do on Sundays. There's other videos. And as a video that I did, secrets to recording guitar or something like that, 5 tips, 10 tips. I'll try to link below. Watch that. It's in there. So I had that, and then I did score a Soldano Hot Rod 50-watt version, modified. That's why nobody wanted it. It had a clean channel put in, which is actually a great clean channel. It had a different effects loop. It was actually improved, but the guy on eBay made it sound as if it was all wired wrong and bad. So I scored this Soldano Hot Rod in purple for $560. That's worth quite a bit of money now. Never gonna sell it. And so I had that Soldano. I had the lead sound I was looking for. I had this 80s power chord rhythm sound. And did a whole album with that. And I did also buy one after another all the amps from Blackheart. They had a 5-watt one, dirt cheap. 5-watt Blackheart amp. Didn't distort much, but was so dynamic and so absolutely amazing. I mean, some of the stuff I recorded with that, some of the most expensive boutique amps that I have, would barely be able to rival that. Now, one of the main lead sounds on that expensive album that I did is actually the Blackheart Killer Ant. 1-watt amp that my mom gave me for Christmas for $120. But it's a 1-watt, it's pretty much all fully cranked Marshall. It's a Marshall, everything dimed, and you've got one knob cranking that up. Put an SD1 in front of that, it sounds better than a Soldano for leads. Mind-blowing. The 15-watt amp didn't do it for me. And then I bought the 100-watt version, which I still have. BH100, I think. Blackheart BH100, yep. It's a behemoth. It's huge, it's heavy. And I did a whole classic rock album with it. not on the drive channel, on the clean channel, as I did back in the day, just cranking it up. Just cranking the shit out of it into that 112 with the Sennheiser 609. So slowly but steadily, I was getting into tube amps. I was starting to understand how to boost them with certain pedals. And I was recording them with good results. Then my dad died. We built the house here. So I bought an old house, very old. And we did an addition to it. The addition is the studio and the living room. And I built 7 huge cab isolation boxes in the basement. Had cabs in all of them, mics in all of them, cables running with a stage box into the studio. So in the basement, in huge boxes, were these cabs screaming. And in the studio, I could literally say, let's go to this cab, and we take this mic into this input, right? That was what I could do. Pretty much what we do now with IRs. But no attenuators, no anything. Everything was going into real cabs, in isolation boxes, all mic'd up. And that's what I did. And then I wanted to do some more hybrid picking stuff, right? And bought a Dynacomp at Thomann, because if you want to do country hybrid picking, you need a compressor, someone told me. And I had a couple bucks left, and during that purchase, I bought the Ultimate Drive and the American pedal from Harley Benton, which I then found out are Joyo pedals. And I was very impressed by them. I had no idea that was a, oh God, what's the Ultimate Drive? An OCD, that's a full-tone OCD ripoff. I had no idea. I didn't know the other one was technically supposed to be a simulator pedal, a Sans amp ripoff, clone, yeah, whatever. I had no idea. I just thought these sounded great in my amps. And then did a video for them with my student Moritz. Because I thought, let's tell people about it. I had no idea there was a whole community on YouTube doing pedal reviews. I didn't know about the Tone King, didn't know about Phil McKnight, Mike Hermans, Gearman Dude. Got to meet those people later. Mike Hermans I still haven't met in real life. Hey, Mike. And so I did these videos just for fun. And those 2 Harley Benton pedals started the channel. Then I did more Harley Benton pedals, then Joyo pedals, started working with Joyo and so on. And that started the journey down the rabbit hole of learning about more pedals. The first fuzz video I did, I literally thought the pedal's broken. I didn't know what a fuzz was supposed to sound like. Honestly, I thought this is shit. Octave fuzz, what's happening here? I thought it's broken. Told the company, this doesn't work. Pretty funny, because I didn't know. And then got some more amps, bought some stuff used. Later on, the channel got more successful, started working with brands who then gave me great deals or actually left the amps for a review, which is how the amp wall and all the stuff I show in videos happened. And throughout the years, I, of course, learned a lot more about attenuators, impulse response loaders, or simulators like the aux, how to get those sounds, miking techniques that went past, let's put a 609 or an SM57 in front of it. Of course, I experimented with ribbons. Now I use ideally 3 mics, a dynamic, which is a 57 or an MD421 or something like that, then a high-end ribbon, which I now gladly say I work with AEA, and I've got the R92, now I've got the brand new N22 from AEA that I'm going to try out, and a stereo ribbon in the room to capture a little bit of that room tone. So yeah, you can really go down a big rabbit hole. And of course, recorded more, watched other channels, did my own tests, Another revealing part of my journey was when I got my Magmal. John Mayer and the greats like him, they sound like them even on a Fender Hot Rod. I've seen a video clip of him at Berkeley playing through just that amp that started my journey in tube amps, even though back in the day I had a Savage 120. But that was way before I was ready to comprehend how good that amp was. Now I've got a it's what they're called, Engel. Now I've got an Engel Founders Edition, which is really based on, way, way back there, a long evolution. But anyway, now I understand the brilliance of that amp, which I had back in the day. But the thing that really started my journey was that Fender Hot Rod. So John Mayer playing through one of those sounded exactly like John Mayer. The harmonics were there, the tone development. He sounded like him. And that teaches you, do you need a Dumble? Do you need whatever super mega high-end amps he has? Don't know how much that helps because John is John. Any great guitar player is any great guitar player because of who they are and how they play. However, the guitar, I think, is a lot more responsible for pushing you in that direction. So the first indication of this was when I was recording that album where I was doing the leads with that little 1-watt amp and an SD1 in front of it. And I wanted those articulated, alternate picked, everything is picked, Steve Morse sounds. Okay, big Steve Morse fan. And I did get Steve Morse Y2D used on eBay for $1,500. Absolutely killer deal. Will never sell that guitar. It's an amazing guitar. And I recorded a lot of that stuff with that guitar because it just plays so beautifully. But when you play that guitar, playing like Steve Morse and getting that attack because of that bird's eye maple neck and how the pickups are and maybe how you play and maybe how in your head you want to be like Steve Morse because you have that guitar in your hand and then maybe your attack changes a bit. That guitar made me sound a lot more and play a lot more like Steve Morse. And I could get in that direction with that guitar and those sounds from that amp and that SD1. And he was actually supposed to play on that album. And the email with the tracks where I did placeholder solos landed in his spam. And then he wrote back too late. He was supposed to play the solos on the album. And he wrote to me when the album was already done and said, look, I just saw this in spam. Damn it. I'm so sorry. But you know what? From what I heard, you had it covered. Didn't need me. That's very kind. Thank you, Steve Morse. You're a gentleman. I'm no Steve Morse. But the stuff I laid down as placeholders sounded Steve Morse-esque because of that guitar. Now, when I got my Magmal, which is a very high-end, beautifully built, amazing 70-year-old Woods vintagey Strat, and I started playing with that in a great amp. Don't even know what the amp was. No, whatever. Maybe a hot rod. I understood how John Mayer can sound like John Mayer. Because a guitar on that level helps a lot. Because once I hear, I attack the note. And once that note hits my ear, the guitar allows me to do a bend and the note's still there. Oh, I can still attack now. So it allows me to reveal and discover things in my playing that I didn't know were there and work on them and get a little bit closer to a tone like John Mayer. So him having a very high-end, especially for him made Fender custom shop, most certainly helped him sound like that. However, once I played on that guitar, once I know that I can get those sounds, once I knew where I was going, once my ear was trained to react, once my fingers understood, that's the bend and you only have to tap it lightly, whatever, I could transfer those skills onto lesser quality guitars, which might make it a little bit harder to get it. But once I knew that it was in me, because the guitar tickled it out of me, I could sound better on lower quality instruments. So having these revealing moments, having these moments of, nah, that's how that's done. Thank you, expensive instrument. You can transfer that on lesser gear. I have, just like you so many times have done, always said a guitar doesn't get better past $1,200. I have falsely said that. And I read that comment because guitar players are very, 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 very opinionated. I read that comment many times. You know what? I want to scream at you commenting that. I want to type, but it's still wrong and you have no idea. I said the same thing. I said the same thing. I recorded lots of my albums with a used PV for $200. It's not going to get better. I said the same thing. What that McMull Strat taught me, no PV, no Ibanez, not even my Ibanez Gem, which is a nice, expensive guitar. They all couldn't teach me that. I needed that McMull to learn something about my playing and what was in me and how to get those details out. To now, when I play the Gem or something else, I know what I'm trying. I know what I'm hearing for, and I'm targeting that tone. We're coming back to tone, right? I'm targeting that. It's still a bit easier with a high-end guitar. My Shabbats, of course, my Nick Huber, my Sully. Those are phenomenal, super high-end instruments. My Fibonacci. But once you know where you're going, you can get that with a lesser instrument. And I could go with honestly, a higher end Harley Benton Strat to a Fender Hot Rod and get some pretty good sounds out of it. But I wouldn't have gotten those sounds out of it 20 years ago. So I have no moral of the story. The moral isn't going buy a 7,000 euro Strat. If you can play one, maybe do it. Does gear make you, do you need high-end gear to sound like that? No. Does high-end gear sometimes help you realize something about yourself and your playing? Sure. Where I'm now, I've got all the amps one could ever want and then more. I've got all the dream guitars anyone could ever want. What do I do with them? Nothing. Use them in videos to show you even more gear. I do my little tracks for the videos. Love them. Have fun. I learn something new about the gear that I'm using every time. Most of the time, obviously, a piece of gear is in focus, which is being used to record the track. But I learned something about it. I learned something about myself. Learned something about IRs. The journey is never over. Never. Because on the day where you say, oh, I nailed it, I know everything there's to know, where's the fun in that? Huh? Where's the fun in knowing everything? Der Weg ist das Ziel, is what my mom says. The path is the journey. That sounds wisdomy. I don't know. I just want to talk about where I come from and why, where I stand now. And if you buy something because you see it in one of my videos and I talk about it, how that relates to what I know and where I come from. Honestly, a Pete Thorne knows way more about setting up an amp and sag and power amp distortion and a plexi than probably I ever could. That's his world. He knows his shit. Can I do that? Nah. Haven't learned that yet. Maybe Pete can show me. The day where you think you know everything, go ahead and shoot yourself, because that's what are you gonna do with the rest of your life? I'm out. Animals at the end. Side down.
say that nothing could unlock our chains. Now it seems like all those painful efforts have been made in vain. The fairy tale is ending here, the hero doesn't get his way. I disconnect the telephone as hope has finally gone astray.